Hey everyone, welcome back to The Arena. I'm Mike David, joined by Matt Kavachis, and once again, a very special guest. If you're new here, welcome to our Arena, a space in which we delve deep into conversations around people's life stories and all things health and wellness. These conversations are deep and are meant to inspire others to tap into their own vulnerabilities. I'll pass it over to Matt shortly to say hello and intro our guest. Before I do, it's always love and appreciation to those who are listening. And if you know anyone who is not listening, do send the conversation their way if you think it could be of value. Over to you, Matt.
Hey guys, we have a fun guest here with us today. Quite a powerful story. Brittni De La Mora is an American pastor, former pornographic film actress. She founded the Love Always Ministries alongside her husband, who was just doing some work for us backstage. Wonderful man, Richard, I believe is his name.
Yes.
And she has an incredible story of life transformation and powerful messaging to go along as a now outspoken critic of pornography. So, Brittany, first and foremost, thank you for joining us.
Of
I always
course.
like to start off these shows with the question of who is Brittni De La Mora?
Oh my goodness, who am I? Where do I begin? I think, I'm a woman that is on a journey just like we all are. I've been through hell and back, and I'm grateful to where the hardships of my life have led me. I can look back at my life where it was once filled with tears and sadness, and I can look back and actually be grateful for all of those moments. You said I'm a wife, I'm a mom. Those are some of my greatest pride and joy in life, is being a wife and a mother. There was a time where I thought that I'd never get to be a wife and a mom, and so I'm so grateful for that. And I'm just grateful that my hardships have led me to a place where I can help people who are struggling in the same ways that I once was.
Yeah, it's I guess a ton of gratitude jumps out early, and that was one of the first questions I had in my mind was, when we go through these life experiences and these journeys and these hardships, do we all get to a place afterwards where we look back and we don't have regrets necessarily, but we look back and see those as, a part of our journey and, there for a reason. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit deeper in terms of how you look back at, various chapters of your past life, and how they're serving you today?
Yeah, unfortunately I don't know that everybody gets to that place. I think that I know people that are in their 60s, 70s. They haven't got there yet, and I'm hopeful that they will. Family members, and but I do think that a lot of people are reaching that place where they can look back at their upbringing. They can look back at the hardships that they faced, the trials, the tribulations, and they can look back and say, you know what? I'm grateful because of where it's led me. So for me in my life, it's like I was in the adult film industry for 7 years. I was diagnosed with bipolar depression, schizophrenia. Like I literally heard voices. It was drug induced from crystal meth. And my life was a mess. Like I shouldn't even be alive today. So the fact that I'm living, I'm breathing, and I've been given a second chance at life, I'm able to be a wife and a mom, and I have a wonderful husband. Like I'm breaking all the statistics because my life where I'm at now is not what it should be. Like somebody with a past like mine, shouldn't, according to a lot of standards that I hear, I was on the whatever podcast, and some of the things that they say, I'm just like, man, it's like I shouldn't have a husband. I should never have had children, like all the things. I'm breaking down all of their ideologies of like what they think a woman with a past like mine should have. And I just believe that God has given me a second chance at life. And that's why I can look back with so much gratitude, because like I have been given a second chance, and I'm so grateful every day just to be alive.
And so I want to dive into kind of the preface of the story, if you will. Can you kind of talk our audience through what was the upbringing of your life, and how did we ultimately get led into, what we'll call that rock bottom journey, part of the journey? What was going on in your upbringing that led to all of these other events?
I grew up in an emotionally abusive household, and every day I questioned my worth, my identity. I would remember going to bed at like 10 years old just with a roll of toilet paper crying, and I would just think, what is the point of life? Like, why am I even alive? Why am I here? Because life was so miserable. Like, it was felt like I was filled with so much hatred towards, my caregivers. I was filled with hatred towards myself, that I just didn't even want to be alive. I started cutting when I was probably 13 or 14 years old. And I just, had anorexia at 16. Like I just went through just a lot of heartache. And so when I started going to college, I decided to dance at a strip club. I had had one experience in high school where we were out partying, and I ended up going into a strip club at 16 years old. And so that's kind of where that idea came from, because I made, I don't know, like $140 or something, which for a 16-year-old, that was really good. It took me probably like a week to make that back then, And so I'm like, wow, I can make money. So I was going to college, working full time, and I just thought, I'm going to go dance. I'm going to try to make more money there. And so I started dancing. And the praise and the affirmation that I got there felt so good. It's like, wow, I didn't get any of this at home. I don't feel good about myself, but these people are telling me that I'm beautiful, and it feels good. It feels like I finally found my place of validation. So that's kind of where it started. And then I met a couple producers in the strip club that, again, came in affirming me and tipping me great money and said, we make romance movies. If you're ever interested, give us a call. So I was already promiscuous. I was taking my clothes off for money. So for me, it was just kind of like the next step in my journey.
What are your thoughts on the producers of porn? You mentioned somebody in a strip club. This is not a question I was going to ask, but it just came up in the moment, and I'm just curious. Do you feel, in your experience? I don't know the right word. I don't want to use the word broken, but are they is emotionally maybe traumatized, or are they insecure? Like, how do they relate to the actual performers?
I know one guy that is incredibly well known within the industry. He makes all the movies that he makes. I mean, they're the ones that everybody watches. I don't want to give his name, but I know his story personally, and I remember him sharing that in high school he was bullied. And so he carried that brokenness and went into the porn industry to make movies, and that was a place where he found affirmation and validation. And he was no longer the one that was being bullied, but everyone was looking up to him because he's creating these movies that everyone's buying and making millions and millions of dollars. So I do believe that the industry is full of people who are broken. They've experienced a lot in life, and that's where they go. It's like their avenue for escape, because I don't know, it's something about that industry. Everybody's very like verbally affirming, and I mean, it's probably just lust, because you're looking at people, you're like, you're hot, you look good, and it's like it's filling that void that's in people's hearts. And then not to mention the money is great.
And so how are you feeling about yourself during this journey, and how does that evolve? So maybe it starts, as you mentioned, validation, affirmations. Ooh, I feel good. I'm getting all this praise that I haven't gotten before. And does it start? I mean, my assumption is it starts to dwindle, and maybe it's replaced maybe more with different feelings. But would love to just kind of hear how that journey kind of took shape.
Yeah, at first I think that it filled me for a little bit, but it's like a temporary fulfillment, right? You can only be told like you're beautiful for so long before you're like, okay, this is just old, because it's like affirmation that's coming from the outside, and what we need to affirm ourselves internally and actually believe that. But like the outside sources can only fill you temporarily. So I went from that to then like, I don't know, I think it was within my first month, like catching gonorrhea on set and just feeling like, what did I do? Like, this is so gross. Like, I don't want to be in this industry anymore. But my agent was like, it's okay. You're just going to get a shot. Everything's going to be okay. He's like, we all get it. And I'm like, what? You guys told me the industry was safe. So it's like, now I'm having all this battle within of like, what am I doing here? But then I also had pride, and my pride would not let me leave the industry, because then I would have to return home. And I felt like that would give everybody the ability to say, we told you so, you shouldn't have done porn, And so I just kind of stuck it out, even though I no longer wanted to be in it. But I was no longer feeling good about myself, because I'm like, okay, this is like, now I've caught an STD. And then there was a director on set who told me, "Oh, you're fat. You need to lose weight." And mind you, I had just been in the hospital for anorexia like several months prior. And so that was a trigger for me. And so from there, I started using cocaine, and I just became, a drug addict in that industry very, very early on.
And so we always have conversations where there's a distinct rock bottom, if you will. And I'm just curious, was there a day or like an aha moment where everything kind of clicked and you decided that there was some sort of 180 shift that was required of you? Was this like a slow progression of that thought, or was there like a distinct moment? And if you could take us back to where that really clicked for you and walk us through that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think that it was both and. Like, it was definitely a slow progression of just a million different hardships that I faced with being in that industry. But one of the last two kind of final moments where I had found myself involved with a pimp. And so for the last 3 years that I was in the business, I was giving all my money to a pimp. And one day we just got in a fight. And I just felt this sense of like, I need to leave this guy. And for the first time in 7 years, I humbled myself. I let go of my pride and my ego, and I called my mom and I asked her for help, and she came and picked me up, and she got me away from him. And then I had no money, so I was going to go do the one thing that I knew how to do, which was film porn. And so I reached out to a company. They flew me out to Vegas. Before I left for Vegas, I had brought a Bible that I had at home that I had received from church like 3 years prior. And I'm on the airplane and I'm reading my Bible, and there was just...
Why did you bring that Bible? Sorry, not to cut you off, but like, was that something you always did? Was that like unique?
No, it's God's plan. Because before I left for the airport, I had this unction of like, bring your Bible with you. I never felt that before. I hadn't opened up that Bible in 3 years. I received it one time at church when I went. Like, I wasn't a church goer growing up, mind you. I went to church maybe a handful of times in my entire life. But I did go at one other point that was kind of like what I thought was a rock bottom moment. I had quit porn at like 3 years, went to church, and received a Bible that day. And then I ended up getting back into porn with the pimp. So I had this Bible for 3 years, never opened it. I just felt really compelled to bring it that day. So I brought it, and on the airplane, I just start reading it. And I read this book in the Bible called Revelation. It was like the one book that in the New Testament, I just did not understand this book, but I was like, I'm going to just give it a go. Let's see if I can understand it. And so I start reading it, and as I get to chapter 2, there's like a scripture that's pretty harsh for somebody to read when they're on their way to film porn. It says, I have this thing against you. You tolerate this woman named Jezebel who leads my people into sexual immorality. I've given her time to repent. If she doesn't repent, I'll cast her and her children into a sick bed and all who commit immorality along with her. And I'm like reading this, and I just start crying, and I'm like, wow, I'm sorry. Like it was like the lights turned on for me of like, I'm leading people into sin. Like, I have got men to cheat on their wives, like, because I was doing escorting, and then with porn, all the things. And so I had this really heavy conviction. I started crying, and I just felt this loving presence of God come over me. And I felt him speaking to my heart. And he just said, Brittany, I love you so much. This is not the life that I have for you. The life that I have for you will overflow with so much love and peace and joy. And if you would just quit this industry today, I would bless your life like no man ever could. And I took that word. I went to set that day. I quit porn. I started going to church when I got back home, and God really started to transform my life. And so that was kind of my rock bottom that put me, honestly, the rock bottom that led me to the mountaintop.
Wow. Again, we said it at the beginning. There's a powerful story and powerful messaging, and we're just getting started here. But my question around that is, for myself, my faith, I would say, has evolved over time. I would say in 3 phases. The first phase of my life was very much more like on the indoctrinated side, where I'm just told to believe in something, and over time that didn't really stick. And so by the time I was in college, I think I was slowly becoming just a total non-believer, and just thinking the worst of religion. I've since, and a little bit more recently, I'm like in a third phase of like re-exploring that. And, I have a Bible. My cousin, who's a pastor out west, sent it to me, and I've talked to him a little bit about the Christian faith. And, I'm just kind of in this like re-exploration phase. I want to hear from you. How has your faith evolved? Because I think it's so interesting that there's this like church and Bible getting mixed in the middle of this journey of your life. But, how has your faith evolved over time to where it's at today?
I would say, I love that I was able to start off like not knowing anything about God. Like, I didn't go to church. I had no indoctrination. Nobody told me who to believe or what to believe. And so when I would open up the Bible, it was just whatever God wanted to speak to me through it. It was like, I read the harsh scripture, but then the Spirit of God, like, I felt his presence, and he gave me a word that was just so loving, because the Bible says that the kindness of God leads us to repentance. It wasn't just that word that convicted me that led me to repentance. It was in the kindness of God where he spoke that like loving word, like the life that I have for you will overflow with love, peace, and joy. And I love that he said that, because at that time I was struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts and all these things. And so when he promised me a life that would overflow with peace and love and joy, I was like, I'm in, like, sign me up. And that's exactly what he's given me. And so over time, I think that the way that my faith has evolved was, I think when I first started off, it was like, I can go to church and, dress however I want. It's like he's tightened me up in a way where it's like I don't just consider myself anymore. I consider other people. Like, yes, the Bible teaches about modesty. So when I say I could dress, I would wear very like low cut shirts and stuff, but it's like that's not beneficial to me or anybody else, because I'm attracting the wrong kind of attention, right? And so God has shaped me in new ways over the years, where it's like, he's taught me about, just even the way that I speak, with being kind to people. And like those are things that when I first started out in the Christian faith, like I was not a kind person. Like I'd been verbally abused my entire life, so I was more verbally abusive, and like so he's just like tightened up my character, I would say. But my faith in God, I think, has like even just going through like trials, like I've been going through hormonal insomnia for almost 2 years. It's been terrible, where like I will literally go to bed and not be able to sleep, and we finally found the root to that. But like just God meeting me every night when I'm like crying out and praying, and like just feeling his comfort and his presence reassuring me that everything's going to be okay. And so, yeah, I think that your faith deepens in time, especially when you go through trials, because trials develop perseverance within your faith.
So I have a couple questions, but I want to go back because I'm interested. So I think the audience is going to be as well. What do most people not know about the adult film industry? Mm-hmm. Like, I guess I'll just leave it there. But generally speaking, when you see what's on social media, or maybe some of like the common beliefs, like what do most people get wrong? What do most people not know about what goes on?
I think because like people forget that women and men in the industry are paid actors. And so of course when you go to their social media, they're going to be smiling and showing off their new vehicles, and life looks great. They're successful externally, but like and people look at that as like, oh, well, they're happy, so I have no problem supporting them and watching their films because they're happy, I'm happy, And what they don't see is the brokenness behind the scenes. Like I've seen women have to pound back bottles of alcohol just to do a scene, like literally an entire bottle of wine just to do a scene. I myself would do like lines of Coke and pills with the performers in the bathrooms. And it wasn't because like, oh, we just like to get high, but it's because there's something so heavy about just having sex with strangers, the weight that it takes, like the toll that it takes on your soul. It really does, like it really ruins the condition of your soul. And so, yeah, like I don't think that people see that brokenness. Like, and it's so sad because there was in 2019, I believe it was like back to back suicides. And then same thing this year. We're in 2024 now. Like there were 4 deaths, and one woman is not dead, but she's still in the hospital in like a coma kind of state. She can only move her eyes. And these are performers in the industry. So if they're so happy, why are some of the biggest stars falling into drug overdoses and suicide?
And so my other question is, which wasn't the original question I had, but it prompted this one. When there was the other day, I saw something where this lady was I think it was on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, but I'm sure maybe it was on the news as well. But she was boasting about, I think she's a porn star, but she had sex with maybe like 100 guys in 24 hours or something like that. And she was kind of documenting it all. And I guess like when you see something like that, because I think we probably have, or like myself might have a different response internally than maybe you do as someone who's kind of lived that experience. Like, is it triggering? Like, what do you think when you hear or see something like that?
I wasn't aware of that, but I just feel like that's so sad. Yeah, that's heartbreaking to have sex with 100 people in 24 hours. I feel bad for her. I think that she's trying to kind of just get people, like, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Not clickbait, but you're trying to get people going by like stirring this like controversy over having sex with a lot of people. And I think that that's something that she may look back on her life and wish that things were a little bit different, you know? I know that's one thing, like, I don't look at my life with regret, but I do look at my life with like, man, I have 2 daughters now. And like, I teach them about love and compassion and forgiveness, but like one day I'm going to have a conversation with them and tell them, hey, just be aware that, you know, people are mean and there may be people that might show you my porn videos. Like, you're what, Mom? Yeah, before I was married, before I had you kids, I did porn. And that's not like, it's not a conversation that I would wish upon any mother or father to have with their child. Like, that's just, it's devastating, you know? And I know that they'll look with compassion and mercy, but I can't promise that it's not going to hurt them when I have that conversation, you know? And so for this woman, like, I think that we always, a lot of times when we're doing things like porn and drugs and stuff like that, like, we don't think about the future. We're only thinking about the now. And if you would consider the future, like, hey, one day, how's this going to impact my future husband? How's this going to impact my future children? How's this going to impact my future in general? Like, I think that we could maybe make different decisions.
You know, Brittany, I'll say what I would imagine is a lot of people with this sort of past story and moving on from it would want to tuck it away deep into a closet and never revisit it and try and not think about it, act like it never happened. You're doing quite the opposite, and I give you so much credit. I think there's mountains of courage that it requires to do the work that you're doing. And, you know, whether it's serving yourself, your family, your daughters who in their future selves, can you speak to why it's so important to you to go and revisit all of this, to be on microphones and speak your story out loud? Speak not only to why is it important to you, but also how has that helped you along with your healing journey and self-acceptance over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was a time, like when I first started going to church, where I hid my story. I was like, I'm not going to tell anybody what I did. I felt a lot of shame, and I also felt like everybody here is so perfect. Nobody would understand what I've gone through, you know, and all the little things that I believed. And I made an agreement with an organization to share my testimony because at the time we were going to porn conventions to just talk to consumers of porn and performers about the gospel. And it was a really amazing organization that I was a part of. And I shared my testimony with them thinking that they were just going to share it at the conventions, but they put it on YouTube and it ended up going viral. And after like a few days of having like millions of views, I just had this moment where I was crying out to God. And I'm like, I'm so embarrassed because, you know, what if people at my church see this? People are going to know what I've done. Like, nobody's going to want to be my friend. They're going to kick me out. Like, this fear of rejection. And I just felt the Holy Spirit say, like, Brittany, can you picture what Jesus did on the cross? And I'm like, yeah. Can you picture the crown of thorns, the nails in his hands, every beating that he took for you? And I was like, yes. And he said, was that enough for you? And I said, well, yeah, that was more than enough. And he said, then why are you ashamed of the very thing that Jesus died for you for? He said, go and be set free. And it was just another encounter in God's presence. And I felt like this weight of shame got lifted off of me. And so the next Sunday that I went to church, I just started telling everybody, guess what? I used to be a porn star, but Jesus Christ set me free. He's so good. I'm like, so embarrassing. But that's what I did. Like, I felt so free. And then, I didn't try to do anything with my story, but I would just get this, like, maybe conviction to share a post about it. And then, from there, it was like, different media outlets would ask me to come on. And, it wasn't anything that I was like, I need to do this. Except for when I felt those little needs, like those little promptings that you get. Like if you just follow those promptings, you just don't know what's going to happen and what doors are going to open. And so that's like kind of what I do. I just try to follow the promptings, and because I consider that like following God. Like when he prompts me, I'm going to say yes to it. So, but yeah, it's been really healing and therapeutic because I've gotten to a place in my life where I just don't care about what people think about me like regarding especially my past. You know what I mean? It's like the past is in the past, and if you've made mistakes and then you can go and help people overcome their mistakes or like overcome things that they're ashamed of and help them find freedom and victory, then like why not? It gives your past it gives it purpose.
Yeah, it's healing. Helping others helps yourself. I mean,
That's so good.
I think there's some similarities in my journey of coming out. It's similar to wanting to hide it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, man, this is so freeing. I feel liberated. I feel lighter than I ever have. It's a cool feeling, and I guess that kind of leads me to my question for you, because for me, external support played such a big role. Like I don't know how I would have. I'm sure I would have been fine, but to the extent I didn't get the support that I did when I came out, I just don't know how my life would have looked. But I guess what I'm saying is it gave me all the confidence in the world to be myself, hearing things like, I actually like you more, I respect you more, I'm proud of you. So I'm just curious, like what role did external support play in your journey of healing and finding God, and even your husband? Just like I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I was really, really grateful to find like 3 strong, just women in the faith who really loved God and had a love for his word and just for like being in relationship with him, that were able to just like speak words of encouragement over me. Like I felt a conviction of like, after I became a Christian, to stay single for an entire year. And I mean, some people are like, girl, it's just a year. But for me, that was a long time because I was a serial dater. I could not be single. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this year to just really grow in God. And of course, there were people that would come in and try to date me, and like just having that accountability of like, no, like your word is your word, like stick by it. And I'm so grateful that I had women to encourage me all along my journey to like walk in my convictions, because it really helped me to get to where I am today. I can say hands down that I would have been settling if I settled with anybody that came into my life within that year, because my husband's incredible and I can't picture myself with anybody but him. He really truly is a man of kindness, compassion, and love and strength. Like he's just such a great guy. And I'm really grateful. Incredible father and all of that. So I'm grateful that I had women not only to encourage me with that, but with everything. There were times that I got tempted with drugs, where it's like, hey, I went to so-and-so's house and they had pills at their house and like I wanted to take some, and just calling them and saying like, can you pray with me right now, and just having people in my life, because I don't believe that we're supposed to do life alone. And I think that with social media and all this, like I see a lot of the younger generation, I don't even know if they're like Gen X or I don't know, something along
Gen Alpha.
They're just glued to their phones. I was with my loving sweet little niece and she was glued to her phone while I was, and it's so sad. I'm like, there's more to life than being glued to your phone, but I believe that it creates a lot of isolation in people, and they're going to miss out on a lot of healing and authentic relationships because they can't put their phones away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly battling a relationship with my phone right now. But, we are bringing up kind of the younger generations, and I know at one point on your page that I was scrolling, I saw a bit of content around how you talked about OnlyFans, creating explicit content, how these are more permanent decisions that fill for temporary desires or temporary voids. And I think that was just such an awesome message. And again, like I think with all the darkness that we might find in the world, like there's such a voice of light that comes from your perspective there. And I would love for you to just take a moment to further platform that kind of message around temporary versus permanent.
Yeah, so we all have temporary needs, right? Like we may have a temporary need to make some money. Maybe the temporary need is you want to feel affirmed and validated. Whatever that temporary need is, doing things like OnlyFans, that's a permanent decision. Like you can create an OnlyFans and think that, oh, well, the moment that I delete it, it's all going to go away. But that's not true, because the people that are paying for your subscriptions are also leaking your content on Reddit and other sites that allow that. I've seen it floating around on X nowadays, you know? And so these are all permanent decisions that we're making in a temporary place. And like I had to learn that the hard way. So I would encourage anybody and everybody that if you're considering OnlyFans because you're tempted by those creators saying, making 67 million in 3 years, which most creators aren't making that much. You know, a lot of I think the numbers say that most creators make on average 100 to 800 a month, and that's it. So like, is it really worth selling your photos and your videos and selling yourself for these temporary fixes? Like, you can make more money doing Uber, you know? I mean, it's only the top 1% that's really making a large amount of money.
And I guess, what do you envision in like a perfect world, as it relates to, is the porn industry gone? Like, does it not exist? Like, what do you see? Like, what is your hope? What is your longing?
I think that it would be amazing if the porn industry was shut down. I don't personally, that's not what I push for, because I'm trying to help people that are struggling with porn, and I can only do so much. So I'm not out there actively fighting that battle, at least not at this time in my life. But I do really believe that it would be incredible to see it shut down. I mean, we have people reaching out to our ministry on a daily basis that are struggling with mental health. They have started off watching, say, morally acceptable scenes, and they get to a place where now they're watching, like, it's gone as low as like bestiality and even child pornography. And so it always starts off as like one thing, but again, your temporary or pornography is just filling a void that's in our hearts, right? That like, it can't heal you. And when you're just running to porn, it's an escape that's never going to lead you to freedom. And so you just get further and further into bondage. You go from like, hey, I'm watching these scenes and I feel all right about it, but then it doesn't fill you anymore. It's like a drug, you know, it releases dopamine, just like the same kind as like cocaine, heroin. And so like, I know with me, when I did cocaine, I started off with like a little bump, and then I was doing lines and like a ton of lines. And that's the same thing that we see with pornography. And so, yeah, I think that it would be incredible. It ruins people's marriages. It destroys families. It really destroys mental health. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that, you know, the world actually fasts porn for like a month in November. They call it the No-Fap November. And they do that because they want to sharpen their mental health. They want to sharpen their relationships. They want to, you know, they want to help themselves. And they recognize that they do better without pornography. But it has such a stronghold on people. It's so hard for them to give it up. So if we just wiped it away, then maybe it wouldn't be an issue anymore. I mean, what did people do before porn?
Well, my question is, are you familiar with The Diary of a CEO, that podcaster, Stephen Bartlett?
No. I recognize the name Stephen Bartlett, but I don't know. Oh, Diary of a CEO. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've seen it
So
on
he
YouTube.
did a recent, like, he had a discussion for the first time where there's three people, like one psychiatrist that was more anti-porn, it was a man, one lady who was another psychiatrist, something of the like, and then a producer of it, who was a lady. And they had a very lengthy discussion on whether porn is inherently good or bad. Mm-hmm. And so I think one of the one of the reasons for it was that they were saying, the lady was arguing, is that it helps, you know, you and your partner become more creative and think of, you know, see things that you haven't otherwise seen before, and it can be very healthy when in moderation. I guess, what would you say to that? Like, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I get that a lot. Like, people say, well, it actually helps my marriage. But the reality is that most people that watch porn don't just like dabble in it from time to time. And I'm really cautious of what I let into my life. Like, I'm cautious of what I watch on TV. Like, I don't watch horror movies. Why? Because it's not good for me to watch a horror movie and then go to bed, and then I'm not going to sleep as well because adrenaline. And I believe that what we listen to, what we watch, it really gets into our heart. And I believe that we have to guard our hearts, because our hearts determine the course of our life. Everything we do flows from our heart. And so if you're watching these scenes and you see things that are abusive on porn scenes, and you allow that into your life long enough, then what happens is you actually feel comfortable trying that. And I get stories all the time of women reaching out like, I have no idea why my husband thought it was okay to just like slap me, pull my hair, and spit on me. And I'm like, well, is he watching pornography? Because that's what, like, pornography really pushes the limits. And then, if people just want to do a deep dive on how it eventually can create erectile dysfunction and how it can rob you from pleasure of like having intimate, like, there's guys that reach out and some guys watch porn all the time and some don't watch it all the time, but they're like, I've kind of just lost interest in my wife, like I'd rather just watch porn. And so I think that it's like the same way I would tell somebody like, hey, it's probably just not a good idea for you to dabble in like cocaine or once in a while. Like, I just don't recommend it. You could become addicted. Like, I would strongly caution people to also just stay away from porn once in a while. You don't know where it could lead you.
Yeah, I love what you said. And Matt and I were having a conversation yesterday about the emotion of joy, and how joy in some of the smallest things in our world can get overlooked over time when we are this jacked up on dopamine release. And like what you talk about, it's almost like you get to this stage of a numbing around the little things of the world. And I'm just curious, how has your relationship with the emotion of joy evolved? Like, now that you have seemingly gotten to this place where you're super attuned to your heart and you're very present in the world around you, and it just seems like you see the world in such a different way today than in the past. And how has that evolved for you in terms of like where you find your joy?
I mean, I feel like I can find joy in all the moments of life, and it's really like a perspective change. Because, so like, for example, there was a day, anybody that's a mom, maybe dads, but mostly moms that are listening, you'll know you just can't use the bathroom in peace anymore, right? Like, you can't even go to the bathroom in peace when you have children. So I'm like using the restroom, and my child comes in and is like tap dancing all around, and I'm like, I just want to go to the bathroom. And in that moment, I had the opportunity to either feel ungrateful and burdened because why can't I go to the bathroom in peace, right? Or I could flip the switch and go, you know what? I am so grateful that my daughter is so happy and actually feels comfortable coming into the bathroom and, tap dancing around, because there's no fear of my mom's going to get angry and lash out or anything like that. Like I used to when I was a child. I had a lot of fear. I had to be very cautious and walk on eggshells. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to flip the script, and I'm going to be grateful for this moment right now that she is being loud. I'm a little tired because I didn't sleep very well. I'm using the bathroom, but you know what? I'm grateful. I'm grateful that she's joyful, that she's dancing around, that she's happy. And so it's like, even in the hard moments of life, if we can just like flip the switch and like change our perspective, we can literally be joyful about anything. Like, I remember when I first became a Christian, I first experienced God, and I like am like looking all around, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the trees are so green, like everything's so colorful. Those are things that I did not notice before. Like, I would just drive through the most beautiful sceneries. I traveled all around the world, but yet I didn't actually experience any of it because I was blind to it all. And so it's like my eyes have been open, and we can truly find joy in anything if we can just flip that switch and change our perspective.
I think it's also helpful, at least for me. I always think about like who I used to be, not necessarily who I used to be, but like my perspective on life and just how I used to move through the world, and always be like, I felt like I was on autopilot. Life was happening to me. I didn't really have any control of my life, and never really felt joy, and was very ungrateful. And even this morning, I'm just like, I love being here. Like, I did not experience this for so long, and I think it's really helped just not taking anything for granted. I mean, I had the most wonderful morning, and just thinking about this, I was so excited. I went to the farmer's market, and I got raw, unfiltered honey and free-range eggs directly from this farm in Michigan. Like, 2 years ago, Matt would have never done that, like found any sort of joy, would have never done that, let alone found joy in it, and just even on the
My
walk
kind of
over
person.
there. Yeah,
The
like
raw honey, the pasture raised eggs. You're speaking my love language right now.
and I gotta say, like, what I'm starting to realize is when you show up with that level, with that type of energy,
Yeah.
really moving with your heart, like, people are so giving. This is something I've just recently noticed, but I've gotten more free things in the last couple months where I don't want anything,
Yeah.
but like at the market today, she gave me those things. I'm so excited, and then I'm telling her about this Japanese sweet potato kick I'm on, and she'd never tried it before, and I told her it tasted like chestnuts, and she's like, "Oh, I actually have. I wasn't going to sell it. I only have one, but you want some free chestnuts? Totally on me." Stuff like that. And then like when I was at the hotel I was staying at this past week, the lady offered me a bunch of like free, not a bunch, but like a handful of free things because we just had a nice conversation. And so I'm just really starting to realize that I always wanted to impact millions of people. Like when I first began my journey of healing, like I'm going to do this and get on social media, yada, yada. And I think you can do that by just showing up from a place of love.
I agree.
It's really powerful, and I'm starting to see it more and more the more I embrace it in my life. So I just love your answer on gratitude, and I think it really does come down to the power of perspective, which is what you just said.
Yeah, and I can see it on you. Like you're radiating with love. Like you just see it. So I could see why people want to give to you because honestly, it's like the path is narrow. Very few ever find it, right? And like you found this path of like, hey, like I just want to give people love, and like people want to give that back to you because very few people actually operate in that space. And so yeah, I can see it though. I can see why people.
Yeah.
I go ahead, Matt.
No. I wasn't gonna say anything. I was gonna say thank you.
Yeah. Well, you're red as a tomato, and you just made Matt's day or weekend. But we mentioned raw honey. I know part of your past, there's a pretty broken relationship with food, but it's just so interesting to me how when you start to move in your life from a place of your heart and a place of love, like how you then started to, I think, improve the way that you honor your body nutritionally. And so maybe just speak a little bit about like how that's even evolved over time in terms of your relationship with food and how you view that in the lens that you look at the world now.
Yeah, that's evolved a lot over the years because I noticed that even before I had children, I would more eat to like keep a physique versus eating for nourishment. And now I really, truly, like, I honor my body. It's not honestly exactly where I want it to be, but I'm not going to, like, sit there and, like, belittle myself like I used to, And I'm going to keep eating for nourishment and eating the best foods to put the best foods in my body. I was having a conversation with my sister-in-law the other day, and, she was going through some stuff with her stomach, and I told her, I was like, you are a Lamborghini. You got to stop treating yourself like a Honda. You can't just put, like, garbage gasoline in your body, And that's really what I believe. Like, we are all so wonderful in the way that we've been created, and like we have to give our bodies the best nourishment. We are Lamborghinis, Range Rovers, whatever your favorite car is. That's what we are, and so we have to put the best types of food in. And yeah, so I've been on a journey, even lately of like, I've just been doing so much research and like found out how many different vitamins and nutrients that we miss when we don't drink raw milk versus like just having pasture-raised milk, or even like things like almond milk, which most are filled with fillers. So like this year I went on a like even tighter journey where I no longer do canola oil because it's inflammatory. If I do almond milk, it's 3 Trees, which is organic, and they have no fillers in it whatsoever. But like I try to do raw milk. It's just sometimes the sugar doesn't do well with my hormonal insomnia, so sometimes I have to do almond. But anyways, yeah, it's been a beautiful journey. But I love just putting the best foods in my body because it makes me feel the best.
That's it. It's that simple. I mean, that's the exact same thing for me. Mm-hmm. We had someone on that had an eating disorder prior to this, and I was so restrictive. I always had a good physique but the way in which I did it, I felt so unhealthy, even though I looked good. I felt horrible. I was fatigued all the time, and now I've been less restrictive, but I also found myself like I don't really eat quote unquote cheat meals anymore. Yeah. Not because it's more just because of I just want stuff that makes me feel good long term. I think like that's really all I care about at this point. Like, is this going to make me feel good in the long run? Great,
Yeah.
I'm going to eat it then. And that's such a more freeing way to live.
Yeah.
You mentioned you mentioned your family member a while back, but then you said your sister-in-law, which reminded me of the question I want to ask you,
Okay.
which is, you had mentioned maybe some family members that are still in their 60s and 70s and still trying to find a relationship with faith, or just maybe just struggling more generally. How do you interact with those types of people? How do you interact with people you're kind of forced to interact with in some form? Like, you can't totally remove it from your life,
Yeah.
but do so in a way with love and compassion, where I would imagine it can be very, very difficult, speaking from personal experience, to do that sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think just meeting people with like eyes of mercy, right? Like I could battle when I'm not spending time in the presence of God daily. Then the battle with my flesh is like, you want to be like, oh, this person's mean, they're so rude, and you want to be critical and judgmental. But when you're really spending time with God, you meet them with compassion and mercy of like, how sad that like they're struggling, and like I feel really grateful that the lights have come on in my life, because that could have been me. I could have been 60 or 70 years old still struggling. So of course I'm going to come and meet them with love and compassion and with mercy, and just hear their heart and try to encourage them wherever I can. If there's the opportunity to encourage them, then I'm going to do so. But that you're operating in God's Spirit really when you're operating in love, because too often, like, we can meet people with criticism and judgment, but what is that going to do? What is that going to do? It's not going to better their life, and it doesn't make us feel any better about ourselves. I love, there was a quote, I think it was Martin Luther King, when he said, I choose love because hate is too great of a burden to bear. And that is so true. When we operate with criticism and judgment and hate, it's a burden, not just for the other person, but it's a burden for us. It's a heavy weight, but love is light. Love is freeing. And so, yeah, I just choose to meet people with love and compassion, and forgiveness if they've hurt you, but also don't be foolish. You can set boundaries around people. If somebody talks to you inappropriately, like, kindness is also truth. Like, it's okay to say, hey, I don't appreciate you talking to me like that. Like, let's go ahead and move this conversation, and that's okay to do that too. So I think that sometimes people think, well, I just have to tolerate everything in the name of love and kindness. But no, you don't, because love and kindness is also setting boundaries.
Well said. And I've got two quick questions. They might not be quick, but the first question being, your journey with forgiveness, and particularly forgiving yourself. How difficult was that, or is that, to today? And what would you tell anyone, like myself, who has, I think some of my greatest burdens in my life have stemmed from my inability to forgive those that, have caused, certain things in my life. And so I'm just curious, what would you tell somebody who struggles to forgive, whether it's somebody else or themselves?
Yeah, that, I think, for me, the battle of forgiving myself, I already shared when I had that moment in prayer where it was just like what Jesus did on the cross was more than enough for me. And I was able to really let go of shame and the self-hatred and unforgiveness of myself that I had. Another encounter where I had to forgive one of my caregivers, I was driving, it was like driving to church, I think on like a Sunday. It might have been like a Saturday for this encounter thing we were having. But anyways, I just felt compelled to pray for her. And so I just started praying. And at first it was like this very vague prayer of like, God, I pray that you would bless her. Like, just a lot of resentment in my heart. And I felt like God just saying, press in. And as I continued praying for her, all of a sudden I felt this like, it was mercy, it was compassion that fell upon me. Like, wow, like I was just a little girl, and if she could treat me the way that she did, what must she have been going through? Like, in order for someone to be so mean to somebody, who was mean to them? What did they experience? And yet unfortunately they never got healed. And it was, again, like seeing just mercy and compassion, where I was like, I can't, like, I just felt like I saw her as just like a little baby, and somebody must have not been kind to her. Somebody must have really hurt her, and she held on to that for so long that she could be mean to me, And so in that moment, I forgave, and I actually, ended up going to her house, and we, it's my mom. We actually have a really great relationship now. Like, she's one of my closest friends. But that was a journey. But the forgiveness was honestly found in prayer and finding that compassion. And the same is true. Like if you are struggling with somebody that hurt you or abused you, forgiving them doesn't excuse what they did to you. Like your pain, your hurt is valid. What you went through, that wasn't your fault, but the healing is your responsibility. And the only way that you can experience true freedom, true peace, true love is in just releasing them from the prison that you've kept them in all these years. And that comes through forgiveness. And so I challenge you to sit with compassion and mercy for those people that hurt you. Ask yourself maybe what they could have gone through. It doesn't make what they did to you okay, but you know what? You deserve peace. You deserve peace, and you're only going to get that through forgiving them.
Helpful. Thank you. And my other question for you was, whether one of the more powerful, I think, visualizations that I've done, Matt has done, is to go and revisit your child self, that 7 to 8 year old girl, Brittany. And, if you were to do that out loud right now and you were to go back to that child, in one message, what would you impart to that little girl?
You know what? I've actually done that. That was something when I was reading my Bible one day, and I felt God tell me, go look in the mirror and encourage that broken child that lives within you. And I did. I went up to the mirror that was in my room. It was on my dresser, and I'm looking at myself, and I just at first thought, this is awkward. But I pressed through, and I said, hey, Brittany, I know that you're hurting right now. I know that you want to end your life. I know that you question every day why you are even here. I know that you feel like life would be better off without you, but let me tell you, that is not the truth. And one day, when you turn 26 years old, you are going to meet God, and he is going to transform your entire life. And you're going to look back at everything that you've been through with gratitude. So I need you to hang on. It's okay to cry, but I need you to hang on. And as I'm saying that, like, I'm just like crying and sobbing, and it's just these tears of healing. And that's what I said to myself.
Wow, that was great. that was really well said. You have such a soothing energy. Just gonna call it out.
You're so kind.
Very soothing.
Thank you.
I don't know you well and it's virtual, but I feel safe. I feel safe, which I hope
you
that
guys
that
a
should
big
be.
hug.
Yeah, virtual hug. MD, you got any last questions? Because I got one more.
Go for it.
Which is something I like to ask all of our guests. But what are you most proud of, Brittany?
Wow, there's a lot of things I'm proud of. I guess I would say just grateful for is like, I'm proud of the fact that through Christ I've become an overcomer. Like I'm proud of that, because when I look at all the women that have lost their lives to overdose and suicide in the industry, like I just think, wow, like that could have been me. I don't know why I got a second chance and others didn't, and it makes me I don't even know that I use the word proud, but I use the word gratitude. It makes me really grateful. I'm so grateful for the fact that I have these children of mine and my amazing husband. Like I'm proud of the life that I'm living now. I remember like shooting porn and not feeling any sense of accomplishment. Like, yeah, I was making money, but I didn't feel like I was adding to the world. And I feel like now with like the life that I'm living, I'm able to add to the world and I'm able to help people. And for that, I'm both grateful and proud of myself for that.
What a way to add.
I'll respond with my gratitude for you and your presence in this world. I truly, I don't have the answers to those questions in terms of why you're still here, like you ask yourself, right? But it does feel like you're certainly here for a reason. And again, I think a large reason why I personally was looking forward to this conversation is just the courage you're operating with and the impact that you're making, and just felt compelled to further microphone it and spread that message, because again, I think it's just so important and really impactful. So thank you, Brittany, for the work that you're doing, and it's certainly apparent why you're here now.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Brittni De La Mora, thank you.
I love you guys.